taking, this is our time. Just breathe, this won't be a hard fight. The truth cash out in the night.
Hello, everybody. Let me get Johnny on here real quick. Hey, Johnny, what's up, man?
Richard Farabee, how you doing, buddy?
I am doing outstanding, but I really hope to get better later. Really do. Um,
Excellent.
so you got a lot going on this evening, huh?
Say that again.
Said you got a lot going on this evening.
Yeah, we got the last soccer game of the year. So when we hit 8 o'clock, I will be hopping off. So anybody watching, do not get concerned. I did not get eaten by an alligator, a Sasquatch, or a buffalo. I'm good. I just need to. I actually came to the field early, so would be able to start, and then I can just transition from the vehicle to the soccer field when
Right
it's
on.
time to go.
Well, school's about to end. Things will get some normalcy back and little
Yeah.
bit of relaxation and stuff like that. But that's also the time that vacations pop up and stuff
Oh
like
yeah, we're
that.
going. We start. How long do you have left at school, Jackson? About
Um, 8 days.
8 days. Yeah,
Oh,
8 days.
wow.
So
And
yeah,
then
like
beginning of June, we go on vacation, and then they go to summer camp. So
it's not
Right
eight
on.
and
I remember those days. I'm not that old. I remember those days.
oh yeah.
So,
Well, I am that old, and I'm gonna have to do it all over again with a new one.
yes, you are a glutton for punishment, my brother.
I guess I am.
That. I mean, and you wanted this. I mean, this was planned. This is, you know, and that's what blows my mind because
Oh yeah. Oh, it was
you
way
know,
more than planned. It was
executed
executed with test tubes and
with
DNA specialist and everything else.
precision accuracy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just
Yeah.
remember this, folks. Be or fellas, be very, very, very sure you're done having kids before you get the old lop it off of me. Don't go down that road till you know for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I was for sure at 32. I was like,
Yeah.
I don't want no more of this. I don't want any more of this. So
Well, we had
now,
a boy and a girl, and that was, pretty much the perfect mix. And my wife was, she said she was done, that she was good. And then, like
right?
2.5 years later, she's like, I've changed my mind.
Wow.
So, anyway, it's all good. How's work and everything going?
So far so good. This weekend will be the third weekend in a row that I've had off, and I will be back in the woods tomorrow. Last week I put trail cams out, mostly for a test. I put them in an area I do want them in, but I'm having a hard time figuring out the timing for them to work. The
Yeah.
last time I put them out, I thought I had it right, but for some reason it only picked me up. It only recorded me setting them up and me coming back to get them. Nothing in between, and that was
Really?
weird. Yeah. So I was very disappointed. So this time I played around it some more. I put them in another area that I've
Is
been.
there an option for uh, messing around with the sensor on?
No, it's it's the timing where um, if it would do military time, it would be so much easier because I can say, start at this time and end at this time, but it doesn't. But you got to pick two times. When do you want it to start recording? Anything, any movement, and when you don't want it. Like some people don't want it running during the day; they just want night stuff, stuff like that. So it's just figuring out the times and because I want it to go 24 hours,
All
but
right.
anyways, I'll find out tomorrow. And
No.
if I got something, and I'll post something. If not, then I'm gonna keep trying. It's just another piece of equipment that I got to figure out. So, and it's just
No.
taking time to do that. So, with that said, we have a guy that has actually been in the woods with me in that area, that same place I go to. Brian, if you remember last year when I camped out for, I think it was 5 days, 5 days straight. Brian had come out and stayed, I think 4 of those days with me or something like that. So I know Brian, and good guy. There's some interesting stuff. There's especially some stuff I want to bring up that he's accomplished as a Floridian, which is pretty impressive and stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to having him on here and talking and enjoying ourselves. So
Before we bring him on, do you know who the sheriff of Baghdad is? You ever seen
yes,
any of his interviews?
yes, Shrek.
Yes, dude. I've been trying and trying and trying to figure out who Brian reminds me of, and that's exactly who it is.
You think so?
They look like they could be brothers. Oh yeah, yeah. They look a lot alike.
Yeah, maybe. I'd have to go back and look at Shrek's picture again.
Yeah, I think he could get away with it if he was in the shadows a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I
Anyway,
can
let's
tell
bring
you.
him on.
I can't tell you. Brian is a big man. I don't know
Yeah.
how tall. I want to say he's 6'3", 6'4". I
Well,
don't
let's
know.
bring him on so he can defend himself against these accusations.
Hey,
guys.
what's up, Brian?
Hey, Johnny. Good to see
There
you.
he is, the sheriff of Baghdad.
Richard. Yeah, I don't know if I should be flattered or insulted. I'm not sure.
No, y'all definitely kind of favor a little bit. I was saying, because when I met you at the down there in Florida, I'm like, man, he looks just like that dude.
Oh my gosh, I got to see who this is.
Dude,
dude.
he's one of the first. He was a Green Beret in Afghanistan. He was one of the first ones in.
Oh wow.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
he's
Okay, so I'll be flattered by it then.
Oh, you'll be yeah.
As long as
It's
you
not,
weren't
it's not a
talking
bad
about
thing.
The Shrek
Yeah.
movie.
No. Y'all just kind of favor a little bit. It's not, you're not spitting image, but it's you make me think of him. Anyway,
Okay.
Yeah, if you get a chance to ever watch the Sean Ryan podcast, he does a great interview with that guy, and I got to tell you, he's a scary guy. He's a scary guy. He's somebody
Wow.
I would not want to upset in any way, shape, or form.
speaking of which, the dude they interviewed, they call him Ninja.
I watch a lot of them, but I don't remember that one.
Anyway, if you got, he's actually married to he just got married to my dad's first cousin. So he's actually part of the family now. And what's really funny is for their wedding party, like the day before the wedding, he took the entire wedding party out to a shooting range. And my dad was
Oh, wow.
he was in hog heaven. They were all out there shooting and everything. And they both do training. I can't remember his real name. Everybody just calls it Ninja. They both do classes and are experts through Glock, and they do a bunch of that stuff.
Oh.
Anyway, I thought that was interesting. Sean Ryan and all that good stuff.
That is neat.
Yeah. Anyway, Brian, tell us about yourself, man.
Well, I am depending on who you ask, either a 5th or 6th generation Floridian. I live right outside the Tampa area, and I've been, in and out of the woods here in Florida and the rivers and swamps since I was about 14 years old, camping. And back then how our parents just turned us loose, and as long as we made it to a phone and checked in once in a while, that was okay. I ended up joining the military. I enlisted in the Army. I was with the 101st with the 502nd Infantry in a scout unit there, and got to see a little bit of the world. And that kind of comes into play with my, I guess my whole experience in this Bigfoot thing is that, I tell people that I had spent, and maybe I'm cutting in a little too early on this, but just to give it a little bit of perspective, I spent hundreds and hundreds of nights through hiking and, as a kid and in the military and different parts of the world and in different environments, and until I had my experience, I had never seen anything that would lead me to believe that something like this could exist.
Well, let's back up for a minute because you bring up a good point, and because we talked earlier where you were not a believer at all. But
Right.
I don't think people realize how much time you spend in the woods. You know what I mean? You did the Florida Trail,
Yeah.
and that's a 1,400 mile, I think, isn't it?
It's very close. It depends that the 1,400 miles, because it starts out in Big Cypress Swamp in South Florida, and you can the greenway, the wildlife corridor
Right.
goes on both sides of the state. It just below Orlando. It kind of forks out, and you can go to the east side or the west side. All that together is 1,400 miles.
Yeah.
But I wasn't just doing the Florida Trail. I was attempting to do what was termed at the time the Eastern Continental Trail, which I started in Key West, came up. I came up on the east side of the state, went up almost to Jacksonville, cut over through the Panhandle to Pensacola, and then turned north. And I think is it Blackwater River State Park or Black River State Park? Anyway, right there it goes in, and then went up through Alabama, through Montgomery and Talladega National Forest, and got on a bunch of these other trails, and ended up on the Appalachian Trail and headed north from there, and got quite a ways on that. And then that's when I had contracted Lyme disease and didn't know it yet. And I was just getting worse and worse and worse with the arthritis and the hip pain and stuff. And so I ended up having to stop. But it was about 2,300 miles I put in altogether before I finally got stopped.
Yeah, because I know with the Florida Trail, there's a lot of logistics involved because you have to have checkpoints where you resupply and you do
Yes.
different things and stuff. And so it's not just you, it's a team or it's somebody else at least getting you at meeting you at these checkpoints to get all that. So, I mean, just 1,400 miles, if you just stick with the Florida Trail, that's a lot of camping. That's a lot of time spending time in all primitive, in the woods. So for you to do all that, and you've been doing this for a long time, to come out and say, "Oh, I didn't believe in Bigfoot," that's a big statement.
It is. And the funny thing is, though, I think that if I had believed in it before, or at least had a I don't know, had the belief that it might be true, if that makes any sense, I might have noticed things that I didn't notice otherwise. And I'll give you an example. When I was coming up through Big Cypress, there'd been a lot of rain that year. We'd been hit with 2 tropical storms. The water going through that 40 miles of swamp was like, knee deep to waist deep. There were campsites that they actually route you around to where you'll end up on a little hammock of dry land for the night at specified campsites. But I was walking and I kept hearing, it sounded like these 2 guys talking. And there was a, what do you call it? Like a cadence to their speech. It's like, and you could almost make out syllables, but it was like listening to people talk and you're just out of range to be able to make out the individual words, if that makes sense. And I kept thinking, I'm like, well, I'm looking around, there's nothing here except for grass and water. The big tufts of grass that grow
Right.
up, and then there's like patches of sawgrass and stuff. So not believing in Bigfoot, the only thing it could be is other humans, probably hunters, but then, and that happened to me twice. But then in retrospect, I started thinking, these guys must be pretty hardcore if they're going to hang out here in waist deep water all day long, waiting for something to come by. Are they duck hunting or what? But they're hardcore hunters. Well, I don't know if it was hunters. And that made, looking back, it makes me think that possibly that's what it was. And I didn't recognize it for that, because that wasn't in my neat little box of reality. If something's not in your box of reality, you can't pick it up and say, hey, this is what it is,
Correct.
So
Now, was it on one of these hikes, these long journeys, is when you had your encounter?
it was actually on the same one. I
All right,
had,
let's get into that.
okay. I had come up out of the swamp there. You come up around Lake Okeechobee and follow up the Kissimmee. It's not what we would consider, most people would consider a valley, but they call it the Kissimmee River Valley.
Mm-hmm.
Followed that up and went past Orlando and up into that area. And there is an area, a hunting area called Three Lakes Wildlife Management Area. And it's adjacent to, I think it's Bull Creek, I think is the name of it, Bull Creek Wildlife Management Area. And it was so hot during that time when I was hiking that a lot of times I would hang my hammock in the shade during the heat of the day, and then I would use my headlamp and I would hike at night when it was a lot cooler, and I'd make up my miles there. And that's what I was doing. It was probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. It was a moonless night, but you could still hike because the trail's pretty clear. They have individual chapters that manage the trails, and they do a pretty good job of maintaining the trails and keeping them wide open and stuff. And being able to see the orange blazes, with your headlight, you can see those from quite a ways to make sure you're on the right trail. Because, I mean, you guys know how easy it is to step off onto a well-used game trail and not even realize you're not on the main trail anymore. But the blazes kept me going. I was concerned at the time because it had been hot during the day. It was cooling off. I knew the sand in the trail was still warm, and I was thinking, well, I wonder if there's any snakes out here trying to warm up during the night, by laying on this warm sand. So I'm kind of looking down, and I was using hiking sticks, and that kind of comes into play, more for balance than anything else. But I tripped over, I don't know if you call it a root or a log, but it says those big palmetto trunks that, they'll grow across the trail, and then the sand will erode away and it'll leave them sticking up. And I tripped over that, and I tripped hard. I mean, I hit it so hard that my toenail turned black and fell off 3 or 4 days later. But that's how hard I hit it. And when I did, it shook the entire palmetto bush that it was attached to right next to the trail. And there was just like this eruption of noise, because you know how loud the palmetto leaves and palm leaves and stuff are. It was just this eruption of noise. I saw something move out of the corner of my eye, but I was tripping forward. And I thought once I got my balance that I was going to turn and I was going to see the tail end of a deer just clearing through, the palmettos. And I turned around, and there was this something that I could not identify. I mean, the options go through your head. You pull up everything The only thing that it was even remotely close to, except for would have been a bear, and that got checked off instantly. Okay. It didn't have the saggy, how the bears, they have the little saggy shoulders and they stand up, and they just have this real frumpy shape to them when they stand up. And that wasn't what this was. And this thing was, I was staring into it had turned its back to me. That was the other thing. It as it stood up, it turned away from me. So I was looking like right across the top of its shoulders at eye level. And wow. I'm 6'4", so probably 6 foot, right at the shoulder level. Its head was kind of tilted forward, so I couldn't tell exactly how tall it would have been. And I couldn't really tell if it was how far it was bent over at the waist, but I'm guessing maybe 7 foot. That's what I'm thinking. But it just stood there, and I stood there. And the crazy thing was, it wasn't a lot of fear. It was shock. And at first it scared me because it wasn't what I expected. Like I said, I expected to turn around and see a deer butt just bounding through the palmettos, and I see this thing, and so it shocked me, and it did kind of scare me because it wasn't what I was expecting. But there wasn't, a lot of people talk about this sense of just overwhelming dread and fear and stuff. That it wasn't that. It was just that I couldn't figure out what it was, and I stood there probably close to a minute. We had this interaction, and I think in retrospect, I think it might have been, and this is all conjecture. This is just what I think, because I can't prove any of this. I think maybe it had been hunting along the trail, because animals are like us. They're lazy, and they'll use the easiest route to get around the woods. And so I think it was sitting there waiting. It obviously knew I was coming because I wasn't trying to be quiet. I was quick stepping it, trying to make up some miles. My hiking poles were probably clicking when it hit stuff on the ground because they have those little carbide tips on them, and of course I got my headlamp on. So it's not like I'm hidden, especially if he's waiting there, waiting to ambush something. He knew I was coming. But I think when I tripped on that root and it made the noise, it may have felt to him like I was coming into the bush because the bush moved, the whole palmetto. And I think while we were standing there, I think that if I would have just kept going, I get the feeling that he would have just sat back down. And because I think he had picked that spot for whatever reason. But when I didn't leave, it's like he finally maybe thought to himself, well, this place is no good anymore. It's been compromised or whatever goes through his mind. And he just started to just do this slow lumbering walk, and he plowed his way through the palmettos. And then probably 30 yards back, it had started, I guess there was an elevation, and it had changed from the palmettos, and there was like an oaky scrub, the real scrawny looking oaks and stuff were starting right in there, and he disappeared into that. And then I didn't hear him anymore. And I don't know if he stopped or if maybe there was a bigger game trail, behind the scrub that he got on and he was able to walk quietly or whatever, but he just kind of disappeared into the scrub.
How wide would you say he was?
Oh my gosh. I remember thinking, because that's one of the things that just kind of impressed me. I remember thinking, I don't think he could walk through my front door without turning his shoulders sideways, if that makes sense. It wasn't
definitely
like
makes sense.
If it wasn't like I tried to measure it, but it's just like when I sized him up, I thought, man, that thing is huge. And it was very muscular. You could see the cuts of the muscles in its back. And I'm going to say something that might sound pretty strange. I'm not a connoisseur of Bigfoot butts, but let me tell you, this thing was built. It had a badonkadonk, like the cool kids say. I mean, if I had to describe it, I'd say it looked like somebody took two basketballs and put them under a fur coat and tied it around their waist. I mean, it was just firm and packed, whatever you want to call it. It was just huge. And that part was like, just, you could see that in kind of the crease of his legs under his buttocks, above the palmettos. And when he walked, it was like, it was just undulating. It's not, because if you look at like the Patty film, when she's walking, her butt's just kind of flat. It's just kind of there hanging out. But his was moving and shaking. I mean, it was impressive. And I just got the feeling that if this thing wanted to, it could either snap me in half, or it could have just picked me up and tucked me under its arm and walked off with me. I mean, that's just the feeling I got. And I know a lot of people talk about when they see them, you hear reports and people will say, well, it looked like it was about 400 pounds. And there are people that weigh more than 400 pounds.
Yeah.
You know, this thing, if I had to guess, I would say, having been around cattle and trying to size him up, you know, with a small cow, I would say he was between probably like 800 and 1,000 pounds, if I had to guess, just because, you know, their animal muscle is so much more dense than ours. And they just weigh, you know, an animal. I've got a dog that, you know, barely comes up past my knee, and she weighs over 100 pounds. You know, it's kind of a Labrador mix. And so if something like that, you know, that just tells you the muscle. And go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that that's one of the points I bring up to people when we talk about, is it a omnivore, herbivore, all these carnivore, and you know, they say, well, it's got to eat meat because of its size. Well, you take a cow standing on its hind legs, it's 8 to 10 feet tall and weighs 1,200 pounds, and it only eats grass.
Right.
So it's all about metabolism and stuff like that. So,
and you look at gorillas. I mean, I've heard they do eat meat occasionally. I think it's more of a, I don't know, like an aggressive statement from what I've heard. I don't know that for sure, but I do know that vegetation is the majority of their diet. And I mean, look at them. You know, I think. What about oh, go ahead.
What about the hair? Like, was the could you see its skin and its muscle and everything like through its back hair, or was it like really thick hair on the back?
No, it was. I could not see skin, and I wish. Part of me wishes I would have seen the face, and part of me doesn't, because if I had, that might have been the end of my hike right there. But I think it seemed to almost start thinning, you know, from what I could see, just the edge of its head. It wasn't as thick. It wasn't like I don't know how to describe it. I mean, what would you call deer hair? Is that a fur or is that a hair? That's more of a hair, right? The way it lays real flat, and that's
usually the separation is, a lot of people use, for example, a dog. A dog has hair, but during wintertime it has a fur underneath. That's what.
Okay.
You know,
this was more like a hair. This was it was thick enough where you couldn't see skin through it, but it was black, and it was probably, I don't know, I wouldn't say it was more than 2 inches, maybe 3 inches in places long. It wasn't like long and hanging. Trying to think of what else. Oh, the thing that shocked me about its fur or its hair is that it was blacker than black. I mean, I don't even know how to describe it. It's almost like it absorbed the headlamp. It's
Let me say something real quick to the audience, just so y'all know. Johnny's at a ball game with his son, so he knew he was only going to be here for a certain amount of time, and he would come and go. So he didn't leave for any other reason. He's not having technical difficulties, but he is at a ball game. So go ahead, Brian. I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. It was just dark. It reminded me of, you know how some people have the plywood cutouts in their yards and they'll paint it that matte, flat black.
Right.
That's almost what it reminded me of. It's like it just absorbed the light. There wasn't any reflection or refraction or anything from the light until it started moving. Now, once it started walking away, I can remember seeing a glimmer here and a glimmer there, you know, just of it reflecting the light. But
now, compared to a bear, because we know bears are very black, but they do have a gleam, a sheen,
yes,
to their hair. Did he have that, or it was less than that?
It was less than that. Like I said, it seemed like maybe folds of skin were moving, or muscles were moving under the skin that was flaring the hair out, if that makes any sense, you know, as he moved. and it was
Right.
catching a little bit of the light, but it was as black as the screen that we're looking at behind us.
Wow.
And I was trying to think if there was anything else I noticed. One of the things that I didn't, and this tells you how long we stood there and just waited on each other to do something. I noticed, I was kind of looking him up and down. He had a little bit, for having all that muscle, he had a little bit of a poochy belly that I could see just on the corner, just on his flank. Because like I said, he was turned away from me at an angle, but just the tiniest bit of like a pooch. I know that it doesn't make any sense with all that muscle, but it seemed like that's what it was. The other thing I noticed was that he was absolutely being destroyed by mosquitoes. I mean, there was a cloud of mosquitoes over him. I had bug spray on, so they weren't bothering me, but he had a cloud of mosquitoes around him. Crazy thing is he didn't even notice them, and I guess that's how animals are, they're just part of life. It's just something else you have to endure. And if you've never known any different, I guess, you don't worry about it too much. But I do remember the mosquitoes.
Was there any kind of odor?
Not like you hear some people say like a garbage smell, or, like vomit mixed with feces and all, you hear all these elaborate explanations. It smelled to me like an animal, like dogs have that animal smell when they go out and get all sweaty, or even bear. I've been around enough bear. I encountered, like, I'd have to check my journal to be sure, but it was either 12 or 15 bears that I encountered up close while hiking the trail. And they have a peculiar smell to them, but it's like I don't want to say earthy, but it's just an animal smell. Even deer, deer have that smell to them when you get close to them. And it was just like an animal type smell. It wasn't anything that would cause me to say it was the skunk ape, that because of the way it smelled.
Now, how long did it take after that happened for you to like really be convinced that that's what you saw?
It took a long time, Johnny. I put that, if I was going to continue my hike, somehow I compartmentalized that. And I know that doesn't make any sense, but once I took off, I was coming up with, that could have been a poacher in a ghillie suit. I was trying to tell myself anything to not believe what I just thought I saw.
Well, you still had a long way to go.
Yes,
I mean, it would make sense.
Started.
Right.
And so I came up with I ended up settling on the fact that I couldn't deny what I had seen, but that I convinced myself that was probably the only one. That was his territory, and I was leaving there as fast as I possibly could. And so as long as I got out of that area, I wasn't going to have any more problems.
Did he give you any signs that he was following you or making sure you were leaving?
No, he did not. Now, like I said, when he went into those small oaks, he might have just stopped or squatted down or whatever. Anyway, my light wasn't strong enough to penetrate that far into the woods. So I don't know if he stopped or if maybe there was a big hog trail or something back there where he could walk quietly on, because there was a lot of that sugar sand, and it's possible. But I mean, if that trail paralleled me, he might have been, but I didn't hear him. I didn't feel like I was being followed or anything.
Now, did you, how long did it take for you to talk to somebody about that?
Years. I never told my wife. I never told anybody, really. None of the people that I had met on the trail. Now, the crazy thing is I had met this guy at get together. There was a Florida Trail get together, and before that actually happened, somebody was coming up from South Florida that was a member of the Florida Trail. The get together was in Ocala, and they said, "Hey, we'll pick you up. We'll shuttle you up so you can come to the get together, and then we'll bring you back down so you can continue your hike from where you started." And so that's what I did. I went up to this thing, and there was a guy there that he pulled me to the side and he says, "Hey, I hear you're through hiking this year." And I said, yeah, I'm headed north. And he's like, "Listen, man, I'm going to tell you something." And he said, "You're probably not going to believe me, but I saw a Bigfoot when I was hiking the trail." Because he was hiking from Pensacola south. So he was hiking southbound. I was hiking northbound. And he said he had seen one up in the Panhandle. And I laughed. I didn't laugh, but I smiled. And it wasn't even, that's how big of a non-believer I was. It wasn't even intentional. It's just that he said, I don't care if you believe me or not. And I realized I had this big smile on my face. Like, yeah, right. And so he had told me that. And even then, it's like, he said, "Look, I don't care if you believe me or not. I'm just trying to save you from being as shocked as I was if you happen on one of these things." And then it happened. And that was the only place I ever saw, except, like I said, down in Big Cypress in the Everglades, I'd heard that mumbling, which I don't know what that was, but I have since heard that there are, like pseudo speech patterns that people have heard. And I'm wondering if that's what it was.
My a buddy of mine, Mike Taylor, he is a professional mountain climber and adventure athlete, and he's done the Appalachian Trail and climbed Everest and done all this crazy stuff. Well, I don't think it's been that long where I think it was on one of the stretches on the Appalachian Trail. He kind of had the same thing happen. There was an area that there was a natural spring there, and I guess in like a little lean-to shelter thing that was there.
Right.
And he got there, and he doesn't build a fire or anything, but it got dark, and he kept hearing. He thought it was somebody breaking branches and stuff for firewood.
Right.
And then he heard what he thought was Russian, but he couldn't really understand it.
Oh, wow.
But then it got super weird because the breaking of the firewood got louder and louder, and then it became kind of over the top. The sound of, basically, he was hearing the sound of the size of the trees that were being broken. Just didn't make any sense to him.
Right.
But he's been looking into this for years, since I think his 20s. And even the house he literally bought because there was pretty much a famous sighting in our area, almost in his backyard. That's how much he was into that. But even being that much involved in the topic, he still just kind of wrote it off. And then the next morning he wakes up and there's nobody anywhere. And he never got up I guess he was super tired, but he never got up to investigate it. But yeah, it's pretty much just kind of the same thing you had. And that's reported a lot and I've got recordings of vocals that sound, it sounds like it has syllables in it, but
yes.
it's nothing. It's no language that I've ever heard before.
Well,
Right.
the same thing happened when I came up to Georgia. Remember, I told you, me and Hank were sitting there. Everybody was in the woods. We were relaxing. We thought you guys were coming out of the woods. We couldn't
Right.
tell what the words were being spoken. I even looked at Hank. I said, "Do you hear that?" And he said, "Yeah, I hear it." And to the point where I got up and walked to the wood line thinking you guys are about to walk out. But it was like a mumbling, like if somebody's in another room and the doors are shut, the bedroom door shut, and somebody's talking, you can hear the talking, but you can't make out what they're saying. You just know
exactly.
there's talking. And remember, and then when you guys came out way different location than where I heard this from. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But yeah, I've heard something similar.
That's it's hard to describe, but that's the best way I can come up with too. Is that you're listening to a conversation, but you're just far enough away where you can't make out the individual words, but you can tell it's well. In this case, we don't know what they're doing, but it sounded, what I heard sounded like a speech pattern, like it had the cadence to it, it had the syllables, but it's just the words were just muffled.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty. Now, I guess last question on your sighting. How far away was it exactly, you think?
If I had tripped in his direction, I would have ended up on top of him.
Thank God.
If that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
He was, I would say he was within 10 to 12 feet of me. I mean, he was like in the palmetto bush right next to the trail.
Man,
I
that is close.
Because when I hit that, when I tripped over that log, it would, it you know how it'll shake the entire tree, the bush that is hooked up to the patch, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what the proper word is for a palmetto bunch or whatever it is, but that whole section shook, and it was right there next to the trail, and then that's when this thing stood up.
Man, that's close, especially for one that's that big.
And that's why I was able to get so much detail, because it was right there. I mean, it was so close that I could see the mosquitoes, in my headlamp light just flying around. Somebody just popped up a question I saw. It's Dirt Road. Hey, buddy. He said, would you classify that as samurai talk? I've heard examples of that, what people are claiming are samurai talk, but mine didn't sound like that. It sounded just like two guys were talking about something, a casual conversation back and forth, kind of like we are now. And it's just, it wasn't a bunch of syllables, like, I don't know how to describe it. It wasn't really animated. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't high pitched and low pitched, and the volume didn't change a lot or anything. It was just kind of like we're talking now. So I don't know if that classifies as what they call samurai talk or not.
Yeah, because what I heard was the same. It was like a mumbling, like two people.
Yes.
You couldn't really distinguish what they were saying, but it sounded like two people talking, So, and it was coming from an area that me and Johnny had went down, and that's where I saw that stump, Johnny, with the nuts on the top.
Mm-hmm.
That direction. That's where I thought you were coming out the same way me and you had come out that one time, but you guys ended up coming out by the creek and then going back in and then coming back out. So it was definitely not you guys.
No, definitely not. We were that, and that's actually where we actually recorded more of what Brian's talking about on the parabolic, the trip before that. And it's not like like Dirt Road's talking about the samurai chatter. I know what he's talking about, or some people say Russian underwater or whatever. But it was more like you're describing, where it's not necessarily another language, but you can just hear the tone of someone speaking. Right. But yeah, we definitely recorded that on the parabolic, so that's pretty interesting.
That is neat.
Now, stepping back for a moment, you said that you went to that little conference, and that guy had mentioned that he had seen something coming south. Was that before you had your sighting?
Yes, it was. Okay. because what had happened was somebody had picked me up. I was south of there. They picked me up and drove me to the conference, and then we were there for the weekend, and then they drove me back to the same spot where I could continue my hike. But he had come out of north, out of somewhere in the Panhandle. I'm thinking it's like I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Tate's Hell area up there. It's near Tallahassee. I don't think it's quite to Tallahassee yet. It's been so long, I'd have to look at a map again, but it's very very deep swampland. Again, that year we had so much rain, even that area was like knee deep in water when you went through it. And somewhere right around there, if I remember right, is where he said he had his sighting. Place called Tate's Hell. You can look it up if you're interested. I'm sure it's on Google.
Well, it definitely confirms that there's multiple because you didn't see the same one he saw.
Right. And you know something funny, not that this means anything, but you know how the logging companies will buy tracts of land with the trees on them and then they'll lease them out to hunters, you know, to do the hunting while they're waiting for the trees to mature. Well, part of the trail went through this area. I guess they had given them access to create the trail through there. And as you're entering this track, there was a big sign up over the top. I've got a picture somewhere, but I can't find them. It was a sign, and it had a carving of a Bigfoot, and it was called Booger Woods.
Oh wow!
Oh, wow.
Wow!
So I thought, oh, I hope not, because
Somebody knows something. Somebody knows something.
Yeah.
Well, and with your in-depth, experience in Florida woods, I don't think people really they see Florida as beaches and hotels and Disneyland. Explain to them how much land we really do have.
there are hundreds and hundreds, possibly millions. I don't know, to be honest with you, but hundreds and hundreds of thousands of acres of undeveloped land. And what I think is interesting is the land that hasn't been readily developed. It's because it's not easily developed. It's in the swamps. It's in the
Right,
deep
yeah.
woods. It's in the areas that if one of these creatures lives there, that it's prime, that to me would be prime habitat for them, because it's places where people don't normally go, and the people who do go there are just few and far between. Most of them are hunters, and they're only there for just a certain time during the year, and I know for a fact that from pulling, being in the infantry at Fort Campbell, we were in the field or deployed like 10 months out of the year. And when we came back into garrison, then we traded off guard duties, like the main ammo supply point, stuff like that. And we would switch off. And every year around hunting season, we would have this influx of deer that would jump this 10-foot fence that surrounded the entire ammo supply area. And there would be, so, if the deer figure out where that they need to get out of the area when it's hunting season, that anything that has any intuition at all would be able to figure it out. And so they could just stay clear of those areas, while the hunting was going on. So it would be, making them even more elusive if you were, just like me, to just happen upon them. If you're out there and they know it's hunting season, they're probably have moved to a different area.
Oh,
Well,
absolutely.
fellas, Brian, I don't want to mess up your flow, but I gotta head to the fields. But I appreciate you coming on, and I am going to get out of here.
All right, it's good to see you again.
Yeah, you too. I'll talk to you later, Richard. Thank
Have
you,
a good
everybody,
night.
for joining.
Enjoy
Yeah,
the game.
I'll call you tomorrow, Johnny.
Roger that. Have a good one.
You too.
So, all right. So you had this encounter. It's
Mhm.
definitely, life changing. You know what I mean?
Right.
So at that point, that was really your rabbit hole right there. That started your holy crap. There's something more to this than I thought.
Yes.
Because again, we go back. You were a non-believer,
I
you know,
was.
and
was.
you were like me back in the day. I was more of a hunter, where you're more of a hiker, where bears and hogs and Florida panther, those were more on my mindset than a Bigfoot.
Exactly.
I wasn't a non-believer. I was agnostic. I was like, yeah, it could or it couldn't. Who knows? But you were absolutely a non-believer until that moment.
I was. I mean, I went through a stage, and I'm really dating myself here, but when I was in elementary school, we had a section of the library. And for those of you who are younger, that was a place where they actually had books that you could read, on paper. It wasn't all electronics. But it had a whole section in the library that all the boys were just attracted to. And it was like myths and monsters and ghosts and weird stuff that happened, Amelia Earhart, what happened to Amelia Earhart, all these mysteries and stuff. And I used to just love reading the books on Bigfoot and the Loch Ness monster and all this stuff. And I thought it was so neat. And I thought, well, one day I'd like to go looking for one of these things. But then, you get older and you realize, especially, being in school and listening to the experts and the professionals about how, it's not possible that something of that size could exist in our world without us knowing about it.
Right.
And so I just kind of just got away from it. And that's kind of what I adopted. I mean, it wasn't something that I was offended by. A lot of people get offended by stuff and they get a staunch opposition to an idea or whatever. It wasn't that. It was just that I didn't think it was even possible.
Right. So after that, now you've got this thing in your mind. So at what point from then did you say, I'm going to start now looking for this thing or looking for signs of this thing? Now it's your focus when you go out in the woods.
Right.
How long did it take before you decided that now this is going to be my focus?
I think I kind of got distracted. I think that's kind of what Johnny was asking. When did I acknowledge what had happened and start seriously looking at this? Okay, so my encounter happened in 2007 when I was hiking the trail. About 3 years ago, we had bought my wife's getting ready to retire. We moved out of Tampa. We moved into this, what used to be a sleepy little town, not so much anymore. But this is where we're planning on retiring. Our backyard backs up to some woods, a couple of acres that are just undeveloped lots that people never developed. And I smelled something really bad one day when I went out in the backyard, and I figured, we got a dead animal. And I'm thinking, is it big enough where I'm going to have to go get a shovel and move it away from our yard so it doesn't stink the whole yard up? So I'm at the fence and I'm kind of leaning over, looking in the bushes. It's all grown up. And there was a large black vulture. And I didn't see him. I could hear him moving around. And when I rattled the fence, when I leaned over it, this thing came up. And when he did, he had his his wings were like this, and it made that shape. And it came up out of the bushes, and then it was just like I had this flashback of this thing coming up out of the bushes, and it was like it just rocked me. I mean, I just was stepped back a couple of steps. I remember it, and I'm getting goosebumps now even thinking about it. It just shook me, and I'm like, whoa, that really happened. That was a thing that I need to deal with. And so then I talked to my wife about it, and she was kind of upset that I never shared it with her before, but it was just not something I don't know. I didn't even want to acknowledge that it had happened. And I talked to a couple of friends and stuff. And then, I started just like most people. I just started Googling and searching on YouTube and stumbling onto these channels, which may or may not have been good for me to watch in the very beginning.
Right.
But eventually I ended up getting hooked up with a man named Matt Larson here in
Central Florida Bigfoot.
Yes. And fortunately, he kind of took me under his wing, and he kind of got me into the whole logic and common sense, based investigation. And, you got to start with the basics. And that's it worked out well. Unfortunately, he ended up retiring and he's moved to Kentucky. So he abandoned me down here. Um, but I'm still keeping an eye on our areas, and I've spread out into a few new areas that I check on a semi-regular basis. And I started going out with another group called Sasquatch Origins, and guys.
And just for everybody watching or listening, Sasquatch Origins will be on the show here
Yes,
in a couple weeks, I think.
that's right.
So we will have them. That's Troy and Desi,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll have them on the show, and we'll be talking to them about their research and their encounters as well. Yeah, and you've gone out with me. You've been out in the
Yes,
woods.
yes.
We've camped together. We've gone out in the woods. I know it's not an easy trip for you to come where I'm at. It's not really horrible bad, but it's not close.
Right. That's what I was going to say. It's unfortunate we don't live closer because it's like that old saying, and I can't remember who came up with it, but you can't get there from here. There's no direct route. You got to take all these back roads all the way through to.
Yeah, because I live in the country.
If,
I live. I'm surrounded. There's a lot of forested areas where I live. The sad part is a lot of it's private.
Right.
So, you've got cattle ranchers and stuff like this that have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of acreage, thousands of acreage that they don't have cattle on, but they don't like people on their property.
Right.
There's like Texas. Those cowboys that own these lands don't want you on them, and a lot of people don't realize is owned by big conglomerates like Ben Hill Griffin, Coca-Cola, different, and they don't want you on the property. So it's really difficult for me to get in areas that I know there's something out there. There's got to be, because it's just too massive. But again, like I said, we've gone out, and a lot of people have seen footage on my other channel, on my research channel, of that area, and you've actually been out there. You know what I mean? And it's a beautiful area. And it has a lot of different ecologies going on, where one moment, because me and you've done it, where one moment we're in a small pine forest, saplings, then we're in a big pine forest, but then we're in a hardwood area. And then you get into a cypress area. It's pretty much got everything. So
yeah, that one area we went into turned into a swamp. I mean, very quickly.
Very quickly.
Into a swamp.
If we went out there right now, we wouldn't get wet at all.
Oh, wow.
Everything's dry out there. But we had gone out, which was, I have the recording, but it's mutual. It's both of us, really, because we had gone out there to this one area where we set up the audio equipment, and we both kick ourselves that we didn't have a trail cam set up at the time. And when I went back to sit and listen to the audio, and you were there. So, when I'm setting up in the video, you're standing there. People may not see you, but you're there when I set up the tripod and I'm talking and I'm setting up this equipment. It was an easy walk to that particular, palmetto, that I had attached the audio to. And I zip tied it down, you know what I mean? So no animals could take it away or anything. And so when I went back and I started checking those recordings, something, and I told you about this, as soon as I heard it, I called you. I said, dude, man, something walked through the woods. I mean, was not trying to hide sound or nothing. It was just, and you could tell it was bipedal, and it's walking through the woods, and it walks right past the audio, and you just hear it fade away. And if you remember that spot, I don't know if you remember or not, really the thick part of it was behind that tree.
Right.
Because in front of it where we were at was wide open, because we went and sat down for about a half an hour or so, just for things to calm down and listen. And that's an easy walk back and forth to that tree from where we were at. But behind it, it was thick shrubbery. You know what I mean? I think it came from that, because that's the hard thing about audio is you can't tell distance or direction. You just hear, You know what I
Right.
mean? But I did play it for the only other person that's actually heard it was Dirt Road. I played it for Dirt Road over the phone. So, to get his opinion on it, but it was we were that close. I think we were that close. Um, the only downfall of that property I go to is you can't go out there at night. I have
Right.
double checked that recently, and I was right. It does say you can't be out there after sunset. So
That's a shame. Sometimes you can get away with that if places don't, even if they don't allow camping, if they don't specifically restrict you from being out there at night, you can go out and sit at night
right,
as long as you're
which
not making a camp.
I think is something that you and I would look at in the future, where we may not like go hiking out there, but at least go in a little bit and chill. You know
Right.
what I mean? And relax and see if we hear or something like that. Because my biggest fear is if we decide to be sneaky and go out there at night, somebody will see the vehicles there and go, okay, they're not supposed to be out there, and they call the sheriff's department or something or whoever, and then
Exactly.
we get back to the vehicle and they're waiting on us. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I don't want to get in trouble. I just want to enjoy myself. But
Yeah.
so so
I'd
now
rather
that you've
spend money on equipment than bail money, that's for sure.
right, and that's why a lot of my videos are daytime. And a big and you can vouch for this. I mean, you're braver than I am to hike the trail as it the Florida Trail at night. But when you're by yourself, you take a huge risk being out there by yourself at nighttime. Daytime, you can see if there's a rattlesnake on the trail, or an alligator at the edge of this water, or a hog or something. At
Right.
nighttime, you don't see anything, and probably by the time you see it, it's probably too late. And so I don't go out there at night, even if I could. It's because it's just too dangerous. You know what I mean? And it's
Right.
easy to get lost out there. I've done it. I told you about it. I've done it. I've got lost out there, and because even though there's quite a few trails, they there's no rhyme or reason to them. So you can
Right.
get turned around. Like me and you, when we went out there, I had to ask you to check your GPS. Remember that one time, just to make sure we were heading in the right direction.
Yeah, because the
And
trails aren't, parallel and perpendicular. They just kind of snake through there, and you never know exactly where you are.
right, you might think you're going south to north, but you're actually going east to west. It's just
Right.
very, very confusing out there, and it's a very large area. I mean, me and you walked a lot. I don't think we still
Oh God.
accomplished
Looking
5%
at
of
the
that
map,
property.
we didn't even scratch the surface out there.
It's very large. So okay, so now you're a knower. You know this thing's out there. You know it exists. You've done your computer reconnaissance, and then you meet up with Matt. You do that for a while. Um, and you've worked with Troy and Desi. You've gone out with me. So since that sighting, and you've worked with these other groups and different researchers, what other things have you found as far as evidence or anything like that that tells you that you're on the right track? It actually solidifies, yeah, any doubt that you would have ever had. What are you running into?
Um, I found a few, probably by a few, probably no more than 3 footprints that I'm very interested in. I know this sounds weird from somebody who's out investigating, but I'm not real big on footprints. And it's because usually you only find a single print, and it's so hard to get context from that.
Yeah,
It's if I see a trackway, I'm interested. Another telltale to that is it going down the trail, or is it cutting through this stuff that I would prefer not to walk through, going across the trail and into some more stuff that I would prefer not to walk through. You know what I mean?
right.
Instead of just taking the easy route, am I confusing this with a possible human print? That's what's going on in my head. So there's a big argument about do they have a mid-tarsal break? Do they not? Do some of them and some of them not? So I can't use that as a way to determine the type track.
Right. And I use this as an example. So this, if y'all can see this, okay. All right.
Mm-hmm.
There's no mid tarsal break at all. Okay. This is huge, but there's no mid tarsal break. Okay. Not at all. This is the a Patty footprint. This is from the Patterson Gimlin film. And there's no mid tarsal break. And I tell people all the time, it doesn't have to have that. People disregard footprints because it doesn't have a mid tarsal break,
Right.
and it doesn't have to. And I think there's a lot of things that determine that mid tarsal break. I think for me as a researcher, I think, and I try to think logically and forensically, and you do too, because we've had these discussions.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, for a mid-tarsal break, it's grip. So I think if you had an incline or a decline, it may have a mid-tarsal because it's gripping the ground so it doesn't slide down the hill or something like that. But if it's regular ground, there's no reason for it to grip the ground. It just walks along. Like I
Right.
said, this is I got this a couple years ago. You were there with Jeff Meldrum,
Mm-hmm.
and I got this from him. And like I said, there's no mid dorsal break, but yet he'll confirm that they do have it. See what I'm saying? But I think it's one of those things that isn't necessarily used all the time. You know, I think when they're young, where they're infants, they're juveniles, just like gorillas. A gorilla will place one in an area or set it up in a tree till it comes back. Well, you would think they would have a mid dorsal to hold on to the branches or to hold on to something to so they would need that break and stuff like that. So yeah, I agree. With footprints, especially I've done it too. You find a single footprint, the only thing you can get from that is size. You can always measure
Right.
depth to give you an idea, but it's the only other thing you're going to get out of it is direction. That's it. It was this print's pointing that direction. It went that way, and that's when we usually measure, 4 feet, let's say 5 feet, and look for another print, and then go 4 or 5 feet, look for another print. Which I've been out with people that we've done that and found further prints. You know what I
Right.
mean? But the substrate changes. People don't realize that substrate changes within feet of each other. And one moment you're in pine needles, next moment you're in sand, next moment you're in something else. So um, prints are very, very difficult. Very difficult. You can do it. Humans out there barefoot, you're still going to find one or two prints. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Okay, there you are.
Yeah, I think we had a little bit of a lag there, but I think we're good now. Um,
Yeah,
the
there it was a short. Yeah, it was a short buffer. Like I said, I think it's StreamYard's issue.
Okay, but yeah, you got that.
Go ahead.
And sometimes you'll get what I call, well, when I was in the Army, they differentiated them between trackways, which had a verifiable track. Usually if you're tracking men, you're looking for a tread pattern, occasionally barefoot, but you know that it's a track you can identify. And then there are treadways where you can tell like the vegetation has been pushed down about the size of a footprint, but there's no actual track there. So
Yes.
I've seen some interesting treadways in that the distance, the step distance is larger than normal, approaching 3 feet versus, I'm 6'4". I have like a 2.5 foot tread. If I get farther or step, I'm sorry. If I get farther than that, which is 1 foot to the next foot, the stride length would be 1 foot to that foot 2-step forward. But the step length, if I get much farther than like 2.5 feet, I start looking really awkward if I'm walking, you know. So if I see
Right.
something that's wider than that, then I'm interested in it. So I got that kind of a few of those going on. And that more than anything else just tells me that this is an area that I might be interested in, you know, because it's not, like you said, it's not telling us much more than that. I've heard some interesting sounds in a couple of places that I could not identify. I never say completely, because coyotes can make sounds that just blow your mind, some of the sounds they can make. But I have heard some interesting sounds that I could not identify. And usually coyotes, and I don't even know how to describe this, so I'm just going to say what's in my head. They have a canine type sound, you know, buried somewhere within whatever you're hearing. You're going to tell there's like a twinge of canine in there. Same with a bear. A bear makes a deep growl, but it has that bear sound, the sound that they make in their chest. You know, it just sounds like a bear to me. And same with other animals. One night I was in an area that Matt and I have heavily investigated. And what I like to do, if I can go in and camp somewhere, I will do a lot of night investigation. I have a full spectrum camera that picks up infrared, and I have an infrared spotlight that cannot be seen. I know, like, some of the security lights, they're like near infrared, they're right on the edge of it. And I think it's like 850 nanometers or something they call it.
Correct.
And you can detect that. Well, I have a light that's 940 nanometers, and unless you're
Right.
like within 2 inches of the lens of the light, you can't see that red glow. And so I use that, and using the camera. Another method I picked up in the Scouts was you scan the ground, you look for obstacles, you know, holes or roots or big sticks, whatever. Is that ground like 3 or 4 feet? And then you start scanning, and then you use your memorization of the ground and step forward while you're scanning. And then you stop and you repeat that over and over and over again. Well, one night I ended up jumping up a big hog and a deer who tried to charge me. I always keep a spotlight on my side just in case of an emergency, and I shined it on the deer and stomped my foot, and he took off. But then later on, I was going down this trail, and it was very dark, and I was, you know, obviously making noise walking, but I had no light on that could be seen. And I heard this deep, deep growl that just sounded like a growl. It didn't have that raspy bear. Again, I can't describe it, but I can just tell when a bear is making a noise. It was just a deep growl, and it spooked another deer. When this thing growled, this deer jumped up out of the brush and came springing across the trail right in front of me. I never did see what it was. I pulled the thermal out, scanned through, but it was really thick brush. So I don't know, but that kind of stuff, you know, it tells me I think I'm in the right area, and it gives me motivation to keep going. Also in that area, I talked to range. I know a couple of rangers that work that area now. I know Florida, the wildlife, the law enforcement agency. My son actually works for them. He's a biologist. He's not with the law enforcement side, does invasive species stuff. But I know a few of the officers now. I've talked to them about, you know, if you hear anything, if somebody calls in some kind of crazy report, if you don't believe it, you know, please pass it along, stuff like
Right.
that. I also got in with some of the crews, the private contractors who were cleaning up after these hurricanes in some of these parks along along the river in that area, and some of them had reported hearing some unidentified howlings and weird vocals from the other side of the river from where they were working, because they were in there with all that heavy equipment, clearing down trees and stuff. I'm getting a lot of good feedback in that area.
Well, and that's why I explain to people is when we go into an area, it's you're a hunter, okay? Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
you're not out there to shoot this thing, but you're a hunter, just like deer. When I was an avid deer hunter, I went into areas first looking for trails, some kind of super highway for deer, and then I looked for scrapes, rubs, maybe some antlers, definitely prints and stuff. And when you put that all together, you're like, okay, this is a viable area. This is where I'm going to set up my deer stand, and hopefully I bag a nice buck. It's the same with Sasquatch. When we go into these areas, we're looking for signs that says this is where we need to be. This is where we need to set up equipment, and stuff like that. That's the forensic part of it. That's getting in there and trying to find these things and stuff like that. Um, and a focalization, while you're out there, that tells you, okay, there is definitely something in the area. Um, so that's, like I said, that's the forensic part, putting it all together to say, this is where I need to invest some of my time at.
There's also a really, really good find, which I'm not going to discuss. You're going to have Troy and Desi on the show in a couple of weeks. That it's one of the most impressive things I've ever seen as far as evidence. And it's a type of print. I will go that far. But I've just really been impressed by it. And that's kind of given me the motivation to move over a little bit into the green swamp area, where I like the area. The thing that frustrates me is there's no natural terrain that would cause something to be routed through an area. You could set up an observation post here, and there's no reason why something would come by you versus 500 yards away versus miles away. There's just no obstructions in the landscape at all. The area where I got growled at, and also that not to investigate a lot, that's actually part of a narrow corridor, and maybe that's something that I need to talk about just a second. For people who don't know, in Florida, we have what they have designated as wildlife corridors to allow the wildlife to migrate up and down the state, even though all the construction and development and stuff is going on. Animals can actually get from the Everglades, and there's a corridor on the east side of the state and a corridor on the west side of the state, and they can come up, and it merges again around Ocala, and it actually goes up all the way into the Okefenokee Swamp in Georgia. So what Matt and I did is we looked for areas where the corridor really narrowed. Some of it's really wide, and some of it has to narrow to get through these developed areas. And I've identified a spot it's only like a mile wide. So if these things are there, and if they are moving through there, they got to be leaving some type of artifacts, within that mile strip. So hopefully I'll just put on them one day and be in the right place at the right time. It's hard now because we're in rainy season, and if you don't catch things right away, everything gets beaten down by the next rain.
Yeah, because I tell people all the time, the rain is a double-edged sword, where if there was something there and you're planning on going out tomorrow, but it's poured rain all night long, well, it's gone now. Or you might get lucky and be due to the rains, it softened up the soil and you might find something. You know what I mean? It's one of those double-edged swords where, but if you're out there, usually if I'm out there and it starts to rain while I'm there, then it's pretty much time to leave. I'm not over concerned about being wet. It's just that that day's over on finding any prints or anything like that because it's being covered as I'm out there,
Right.
and that's pretty frustrating. And that's what happened to me last weekend. That it started to to rain, and it was our first rain too. I finally
Right.
get out there, and we finally get our first rain. So
Yeah, the only benefit I see to it, and again, you would have to get into an area where it was protected enough where it didn't destroy the prints. But in the rain, you can move so much easier without being detected because
oh,
it
absolutely,
covers your
it does.
noise. It's knocking your smell down. I mean, nobody's going to hear you walk through, even if you're breaking stick stuff. Nobody's going to hear you while it's raining. But
Correct.
again, the rain is not your friend in the way that it destroys anything that might have been, any prints or anything that might be on the ground you might find. It just wash them out or beats out, if the rain's hard enough.
Yeah, it definitely destroys any audio that you put out there.
Oh,
You know,
yes. Yeah.
it's all you're doing, and when you go home and you listen to it, it almost sounds like static, just nonstop static from the rain and stuff like that. And I've had to deal with that. Um, I'm a big fan of audio because my first experience was a vocal, so I
Right.
get drawn to that subliminally. It just draws me to vocals. But with that said, I don't like sitting down and going through hours upon hours upon hours of audio. It's
And
it's
that's the
pretty.
trouble with it. It's like unless you've got now I've heard there are some AI software that they are playing around with, can go through things, very quickly and look for things. I know there are guys that scan through spectrographs, all that, but you can miss things very easily doing that. And so pretty much it's however many hours you recorded, that's how many hours you've got to listen through.
You got to sit and listen to it, and
And
it
you
is
kind of get in
time
this
consuming.
zone where when I do it, I'm like, whoa, how much of that did I miss? I mean, because you just get it's kind of just like a fog you get in when you keep listening to stuff for hours at a time. So
My
it
problem is I'll sit. I have to go somewhere, put on headphones, so I'm really blocking out everything around me and just listening to the audio. And that's usually in my room. I just kind of lay down on the bed, put the headphones on, and just start listening, and then I fall asleep. Because
yeah, that's what I was going to
listening to
say.
nature in my ears for hours on end, you before you know it, you're dozing off. So
You get in that zone, and you just start drifting off a little bit.
yeah,
But yeah, the audio, the tracks. I'm trying to think of what else recently. The growling. That was intimidating. I have to say that was a whoa, what's going on here moment because
yeah.
you
I've been fairly close to some vocalizations that have and luckily for me, and it's all documented on my channel. I had people with me, so it wasn't just me
right.
hearing this on those major occasions. Last week, I even had a noise. I don't know what it was. It sounded like a deer when they huff, you
Mhm.
know. But it didn't make sense to me at the time because um, I've been in that area setting up the cameras. I wasn't quiet about it or anything like that. So any deer would have known I was there and not been
Right.
perturbed by me whatsoever. And it wasn't until I was set up and I was standing there and I was talking and had the tripod set up, and you hear this huff, which in my mind it sounded like, man, it sounds like a deer, but it's really really close. Um, but it was behind this tree line across this
Mhm.
swampy area, and I'm thinking, well, if it was back there, it wouldn't have seen me. It wouldn't have been spooked by me. And usually deer do that when you're close.
I
You're
was
you're a threat.
usually from that far away, you wouldn't have been considered enough of a threat for him to huff at you.
Correct. and because if it was out in the open, I would have seen it because it's in the video when I set up the trail cams. It's an open swamp area. There's that grass that grows in the swamp that's about knee high or a little mid thigh high, but
Right.
that's it. So if there was a deer there, I would have seen it. This was definitely in the woods across from that, so I wouldn't have been a threat. And I like I said, avid deer hunter. I really understand the behavior of deer, and it's usually when there's in their face something very close
Right.
and they'll stomp their foot and they'll huff, as a dominance thing.
Yes.
So I don't know if it was a deer and it was some other predator that might have spooked it. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Mhm.
So, but I don't believe it was me. I just don't believe it was me. I was just, it was close enough to hear, but I wasn't close enough to be seen. So,
Right.
you know,
My experience, it's like when I surprise them, that's when they do. If I come around a hairpin turn on a trail and surprise them, that's when they do it. But if they hear me coming, usually they just wander off very quietly.
right, right. You know, so you have all that. Now, one of the things that we discussed one time is, you have a lot of, uh, let's just call it files of, you know, stuff that you've collected because you've talked about having, videos, different things that, at some point you were looking at creating a channel so people can view this and start something and stuff
Right.
like that. Which I think is a good idea. I think you should do something like that, and I'll help you any way I can, because the idea is to get the information out there.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This granted, we all have certain things that we keep secret that's ours that we're like, I'm gonna wait. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But for the most part, you want some stuff out there to not only validate what you're doing and what you're capturing, but also encourage others to get out there and do the
Yeah.
same thing. Because
Yeah.
I'm a big advocate of a lot of people should be out there doing this. The more people, the merrier. I don't care. You know what I mean? If it's not if it's me that proves this, great. If it's not, I'm fine with that too, as long as it gets proven by somebody. You know what I
Right.
mean?
And maybe something that you put out there might give somebody else an idea, to look at something in a different way or to try a different technique, and it might pay off. You just never know.
Oh yeah, because I've built relationships with other researchers just due to the evidence that I showed, and they're like, "Wow, I ran into that exact same thing." You know what I mean? And then
Right.
that brings up that conversation, and you talk, and now you're sharing information, you're sharing ideas and theories and different things and stuff like that. So
Yes. Yeah. I think it's a mistake, people that try to hoard all their findings and evidence and stuff. I think you're doing a severe disservice to the whole community, really.
yeah, it's like especially you got some people out there that say, this does it or this does it. This will bring them out or that'll bring it out. But I don't want to share that with you. You know what I mean?
Right.
Why not? You know what I mean? If I knew that there was a way to clap my hands and Sasquatch would respond or come out, I want 100 people knowing how to clap their hands that way,
Yeah.
because we got to get this thing done. We got to, you know what I mean? We got to move the ball forward. You know what I mean?
Right.
And ever since Patterson Gimlin, we've pretty much been on that 10-yard line, and we need to move forward. We need to present a lot more. Like me, I have stuff, but it's shared. So I don't put it out there because the other people involved said no. Let's hold off on this, and I respect them, and I'm a man of my word. So, but there's a lot of interesting stuff out there. So now, where do you stand on what is Sasquatch or skunk ape? What is it to you?
To me, what I saw, what I encountered, and got to look at pretty closely, there's no doubt in my mind it was an animal. I don't know what type of animal, The closest I can come to is what I've heard people describe as a Bigfoot, but I can't swear that's what it was. I don't know what it was, but that's what it looked like. But it definitely was an animal. There was a, mosquitoes were after it. You could see it breathing. Its shoulders were I could hear it lightly breathing. It wasn't huffing or growling or anything, but its shoulders were moving. You could hear it breathing lightly. I could see muscles moving. I mean, to me, it was an animal. And I'll go a step farther with that, and I'm not going to get into any of the other theories on it because I know that's beyond the scope of what we're dealing with tonight. But to me, if it's anything other than a flesh and blood animal, I just think we're all wasting our time, because since the beginning of time, people have been trying to document paranormal activity, with seances and everything, all the way back. I'm not talking about just Bigfoot, but I'm talking about paranormal period with ghosts and all that stuff. And nobody's ever been able to do it. And I think that, if this is not an animal that we can interact with, then we're pretty much just wasting our time trying to document it.
It's funny that you say that because Wednesday night, me and Johnny were interviewed on another podcast, and I thought it was Johnny, and I brought it up. I thought it was Johnny that said it to me, but now I know it was you. That when you made the comment, if it is paranormal, then we're wasting our time. There's no way we're going to prove it, and I 100% agree with that. You know what I mean? Because paranormal investigating has been going on for a very long time, and again, that's another field that is not moving the ball forward either. You know what I mean? So I'm with you. As far as it's an animal, it's a living, breathing, creature that is surviving and multiplying and is just good at what it does, and which is avoidance. It does want to avoid us. And you bring up a good point when you talk about you were that close to it and it did not harm you. It got up, it just started to walk away. And I brought that up many times too, where I'm not saying they're not aggressive or they won't hurt you, but I don't think that's their first thought process is, ooh, human kill. You know what I mean?
Right. And there are people who have that philosophy that they think they're only out there trying to hunt people down, or not just people, but anything,
Right.
I'm like you. I think there are probably crazy ones if this is what it is, and this is all hypothetical, but in my mind, there are probably crazy ones just like there are crazy people, unpredictable. But anything that gets into the right circumstance is going to react defensively or even offensively.
Absolutely.
They feel it's necessary. So I think
And that's how I feel. Yeah. Go ahead.
If I would have threatened it, maybe, if I would have approached it, who knows what would have happened. But I was just kind of dumbfounded, just standing there. And I think he just got tired of waiting for me to leave. Right. At least that's the feeling I got, and he just kind of just a real slow lumbering walk, just moseyed off into the woods.
Yeah, because and that's where I stand on it too, is that other than us being a little bit interesting to them, I think that's about as far as it goes. I think at best we're entertainment when we're camping and hiking and they're watching. But I think in the scheme of things, if we're not a threat, we're not a big deal to them. I think those that possibly have been harmed by a Bigfoot or something like that probably got too close, probably got close too young and didn't realize it, or threatened them, shot at them or something like that. Mm-hmm. And, and as soon as you become the aggressor, well, they're going to react. A bear would, if you see a bear and you're like, and then he'll look at you and freak out and he'll leave. But if I start throwing things at it, he might take that a different way and attack me. Almost anyhow. People have been attacked by white-tailed deer.
Yes,
You know what I mean? So all animals have that
by deer.
ability.
Yes.
You know.
Matt and I, it's funny you say that. Matt and I we were following a game trail along the river, and neither one of us even thought to check or even realize that the deer were in rut at that time. And we're coming around, and Matt was tying a fluorescent tape, the marker tape, so that we could get back out the same trail. And he had stopped to tie them. I had taken a couple of steps away and was looking around, and I'm looking on the ground, and I hear this branch snap. And I look up, and there is this huge buck with a massive rack. And he looks up about the same time I do. We see each other, we make eye contact, and before I can even get a word out, he's bucked his rear end up in the air and lowered his head, and he's coming at us. And I yelled at Matt, "Look out!" And I grabbed his arm and swung him around, and he kind of went right by us, So
Yeah.
So yeah, the little Bambi guys, they can get aggressive too.
Yeah. Duro was asking, did you hear any footfall when it walked away?
I did not. But I think, well, other than I heard it crunching through leaves and stuff, what I'm guessing were palmetto leaves, and those thick stalks that the palmettos have, and those make cracks and breaks, but no real stomping. And I think it's because it was pretty much that white thick sugar sand.
Right.
It kind of cushioned his feet except for the vegetation. But yeah, I was trying to think of anything else that, I can't imagine what else it could be. If we're going to prove it exists, it's got to be something that we can physically interact with, in order to document it.
Yeah, and the problem is, as researchers, we're so limited. Really, we're limited to what our equipment can do.
Yes.
That's why I tell people all the time. I have a lot of equipment, but each one of them is just only a part. They all have their downfalls. Each one only answers a little bit. See what I'm saying?
Right.
For example, thermal is great, but yet in Florida, if you go out at 10, 11 o'clock at night with a thermal, you're not going to see anything because of all the ambient heat. The trees are hot, the bushes are hot, the ground is hot. You don't see anything. You can only use thermal, let us say 2 o'clock in the morning, when the temperatures have gotten down enough that you can distinguish something going through the woods. Night vision. Night vision you can still hide from. Night vision just gives you ability to see at night. I can still duck behind a tree, duck behind a bush, and you're still not going to see me. I fly a drone. Well, I'm only limited on looking down at the canopy, and it's very easy to hide from it. You're hoping to see something cut across or walk a trail or something like that. So it's all good equipment, but they have their limitations. All of it does. There is no tell all, end all. This is what you need. I think AI is again, that's a double-edged sword, where you've seen it. All this stupid AI stuff that's coming out, and everybody keeps swearing, I found this picture in my grandfather's foot locker, and he's been dead for 30 years, and he took this picture in 1896 or whatever. They come up with these ridiculous backstories on an AI photo. You know what I mean? So, and AI is getting better. So I think hoaxers and stuff like that are going to get better at what they do. But then when you look at AI, I think as far as equipment goes, it can be beneficial. It'll be like, I've got night vision that uses AI, so I can see at night in color. So it has its benefits where, but like I said, AI also can hurt you. As AI gets better in the next few years, I think we're going to see it skyrocket. I think that we'll be able to use it as a research tool, where it will help us identify things. You know
Right.
what I mean? Because AI can use a vast um, library of information to help narrow things down and stuff like that, which again will also end a lot of hoaxes. Because if you're out there doing something, it might say, that might be human. See what I'm saying? But if it comes back and says, "Oh, what you heard was a coyote," like a lot of people don't realize, coyotes have like 40 different calls. They have
Gosh.
a very vast vocabulary as far as screams and barks and yells and stuff. And I always get that where somebody will say, "Well, it wasn't a coyote because I know what a coyote sounds like."
Right.
But do you know all 40 vocalizations of a coyote?
And there
Yeah.
might even be more than that.
Oh,
Some,
absolutely.
some of the biologists I've talked to at the universities, when I've called and talked to them, they said that we probably do not know all the calls that coyotes can make.
Correct. There's some people that said that some evidently somebody has documented up to 70. So,
Wow.
but that's a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a lot. And so there's a lot of things that people send me and stuff like that, and I have to write it off as coyote and stuff like that. But you do it, I do it. We go out there, and even though we're knowers, we also are skeptic. Because you
Yeah.
have to have a level of skepticism, because your job is to narrow down what it is. So you have to get rid of the obvious, or exclude the obvious, and stuff like that. So people, I tell people all the time, being skeptic is good, because skepticism creates questions.
Right.
Questions creates answers.
And if something's real, it's going to survive being questioned.
Correct.
Where if it's a hunch, then you might be able to talk yourself out of it, which is a good thing. I like to say it ain't Bigfoot until it's Bigfoot. If
Correct.
we're not out there trying to identify every noise and every twig break and everything in the bushes as being something unexplained. And
Oh, absolutely. And the two things that I get clear, especially on my research channel, 2 points I always make it abundantly clear is one, I don't call anything Bigfoot at all until I see Bigfoot do it. I
thank
can
you,
I
thank
can
you.
say that this is interesting. I can say that it took intelligence, or it took strength, or it took whatever to create this. But I won't call it a Bigfoot, Sasquatch, skunk ape, whatever, because I don't know. See what I'm saying? Now I can narrow it down and bring it, like if I'm walking and something gets thrown at me, which has happened, now I've got to sit down and narrow down what could possibly throw something at me. And I can narrow it down very quickly, but I still don't call it because I didn't see what threw whatever at me. See what I'm saying?
Yeah,
You
and
know?
you don't know how refreshing that is to hear somebody say, because it's the truth. I mean, the vocals, they can't be ruled out. Like I said, I heard something that I have never heard before in the woods, but I didn't see what made it.
Right.
I can categorize it as unknown. It's kind of like with tree knocks, or the knock sounds, whatever you want to call them. I think it's very plausible, but until somebody shows me one of these things actually making that sound, I can't make that leap.
Right.
It's like that with everything, and I think it's a good healthy attitude. It's you don't discount it completely, especially if you can categorize it as unknown. You kind of just put it on that back shelf, and you keep glancing at it once in a while, and thinking
Right.
about it and seeing if there's some way you can verify it.
Yeah, and then the second point I always make it abundantly clear is, and I tell people all the time on my channel, especially when I used to do some lives. I haven't got to do a live in a while, but I plan on doing another one. Is I'll use you as an example.
Mm-hmm.
From the time that you started spending time in the woods to now, that's a lot of time. You've got a lot of time in the woods. Okay. How many encounters have you had? See what I'm saying? So to
Exactly.
go out there every weekend or once a month or every weekend for a month and always come out with this all this evidence isn't realistic. See what I'm saying?
Right.
um I it just doesn't happen, and that's always been a red flag with me with certain researchers where they go out there and it's like every single time they get you know amazing stuff, and you're looking at it like, well, that's a blob squatch or that's pixelated or whatever, but they get that stuff every single weekend, and it just doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. I mean, for a prime example is Finding Bigfoot. How many seasons was that on the show? You know, what I'm saying?
Right.
you know, there's anecdotal evidence. We all get that.
Yes.
But in actual, they've got film crews and everybody with way more expensive equipment than I can afford, but yet not one,
Yep.
solid piece of evidence that this thing is there. Um, so, as a researcher and as people following researchers, they need to understand that. My channel, I just share my journey. I just share
Right.
my experiences and what I'm going through and stuff like that. And when it happens, they're going to see it. See what I'm saying? Um, but if it doesn't happen, it's still a win. It's still a win because I love the outdoors. I love the wilderness.
Yep.
I love being out there. So when I go home, my batteries are recharged for another week of work. And so it's a win for me. See what I'm saying? Was it a loss because I didn't get evidence? Yeah, you could look at it that way. But I also believe that the more time you spend in the woods, the better your odds. You know what I mean?
It's just a numbers game. I mean,
It is.
when you look at the majority of the reports, they're all happenstance. You just happen to be at this place at this time, and so does this creature. And you have this encounter. But I mean, I look at it like it took me 40 years to literally stumble upon one of these things,
Right.
having no idea that they could even possibly be there. Um, and so people will say, and I say, well, is it going to be another 40 years before it happens again? And people say, well, now you're looking for them, so that increases your chances. I said, okay, so let's double that. So that means only 20 years.
Right.
Or triple it. You can do it, but you're still talking about just it just happens that you're in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say, and I've said it a dozen times, it's happenstance. You happen to be at the right place at the right time. It's finding a needle in a perpetual haystack.
Yes.
And most when you sit down and you start actually, I tell people all this, actually do your homework, read the reports. Okay? Go to the BFRO, read the reports. Go to the Bigfoot Mapping Project, read the reports. It's almost every single time it's happenstance. I happened to be riding my bike and it ran in front of me. I was hiking down a trail and it crossed in front of me. I was fishing and it came up to across the riverbank or across the pond. I was a hunter and it came out of the woods. It's happenstance is so. Even though I'm out there and you're out there and we're looking for this thing religiously, anybody has an opportunity to find this thing riding down a road. How many times
Yeah.
have we heard the thing crossed in front of me on the road?
That's what I was going to say.
It's the right place at the right time.
Sometimes it makes me feel like my money would be better spent just putting gas in my car and driving around looking for it.
Absolutely,
because-
and there are researchers that do that. There are researchers that go into places like the Everglades or the Ocala Forest
Right.
or Green Swamp, and that's what they do is they drive these large trails.
Because there's so many reports of them just bounding out in front of cars.
Yeah.
So,
Deer do it all the time. I've hit my brake. I'm born and raised here. I'm like you. I'm like fourth, fifth generation Floridian, and it's still so rare to see a black bear. But then this year, in the last 4 years, let's say, I've now ran across bear like a dozen times. which is
Wow.
unheard of. I'm like, holy crap! And I'll go to work, and where I work is way out in the middle of nowhere for a reason, and very dangerous road to take at night. And I'm traveling it at 4 a.m. Deer run across in front of me, bear run across in front of me, alligators go across the road in front of me, you know. But like I said, so will a Sasquatch. It's been documented. People have read the reports and stuff like that. And another point that I make to anybody, not just researchers, because researchers are the ones that's going to actually use this information. If you have a sighting, or you have a vocal, or anything that is out of the ordinary that you think may be a Sasquatch or a skunk ape, report it to the Bigfoot Mapping Project. Okay, and I tell them that because it's a great resource. If nobody's checked it out, it's like Google Earth. You know what I mean? And you see all these sightings, and you can zoom in to your hometown to see if there's any sightings in your town. And then you can click on that sighting and read the report. Or sometimes there's a photo or something like that.
Right.
I encourage people to do that because people like myself periodically will check that map in our area to see if there's any current recent sightings. It happened to me. I think me and you discussed it one time where I'm in my research area, and it was Thanksgiving weekend. I'm in camping, and I'm out at this research area doing my thing. And I decided one day to sit in my car, and I pull up the Bigfoot Mapping Project, and I zoom in. Oh, wow, there's new sightings in my area. And I look at them, and that same weekend, like 2 days
That's
before,
right. I do
two
remember you telling me that. Yes.
2 days prior to me getting out there was 2 sightings in 2 days within 100 yards of each other. See what I'm saying? Luckily, these people put it in the Bigfoot Mapping Project, and I was able to. By the time I get out there, it was a week later. I wish I had seen it earlier, and I would have went out immediately. But luckily they did, and I was able to go out there, do an investigation, see what I could find, and stuff like that. And it was 2 separate parties. One was because the state park over here has a turkey run, a 5K turkey run,
Right.
and these people had finished that run for the day and decided to go hiking, and they walked up on a what it looks to me is a juvenile Sasquatch. And then the following day, an older couple, senior citizens, were riding their bicycles on that trail, or really close to that particular trail, and they saw this large, they said it was a Bigfoot, step out of the woods and then go back in. See what I'm saying? So I encourage everybody to document. I'm not saying go to your local wildlife commission and say, hey, I got a Bigfoot reporting. Don't go to the local law enforcement. Don't go to a game warden because they'll circular file it, and that's as far as it goes. But the BFRO, as even though they're not have the greatest reputation in the world, I think the investigators that they have are really good, and they document very well, and it goes into a system where you can go and read these reports. Anybody can go and read these reports. So I encourage people to do that, and it's beneficial to the researchers because we will go out there, we will go in the woods. You know what I mean? And if you don't want to do that, get on Facebook or check out these pages. Look for anybody that may have a Bigfoot, like me. Mine's very clear. It says BFFG, Bigfoot Florida guy. So I'm in Florida. Hit me up on Facebook, or any state that you're in that there's somebody there that has a Facebook page that's a researcher, and say, hey, would you come out to my property? You know what I mean? Because we will. You know what I mean? You're talking to people that are really interested in the subject. So,
and we have, most of us at least know somebody who knows somebody in almost every area of the state.
Oh, absolutely.
So if something happens, if you can get a hold of one of us, we can network and get somebody in that area to respond to whatever's going on.
Oh, absolutely. I can, like, for example, if it was up in the Green Swamp area or something, that's a good
Hmm.
ride for me. That's a pretty good distance from where I'm at, and I've been through it. I haven't researched it, but I've been through it. Um, but if I know of a research group that's up there that I feel comfortable, you know, recommending, I'll do
Right.
it. Absolutely, I'll do it. But you have to be somebody you feel comfortable with, you
Yeah,
know,
that's a good point. Yeah.
because you've been in this field long enough. You've ran into enough researchers. Florida's no exception. I'm pretty sure every state has it. There are some researchers out there that are just, I wouldn't waste my time. I wouldn't
Right.
waste my time. You know,
But yeah, I love to do that. That's one of my favorite things to do is to find out something about an area or have somebody say, "Hey, could you come take a look at this?" And in
right?
fact, that's on my Gmail. I'll put that up later if Richard doesn't have a problem with it. But it's called I'm my group is called the Swamp, the Southwest Wood Ape Monitoring Project.
You need a
Um,
shorter name.
I know it, but that's why I call it the Swamp. But my Gmail is the Swamp Investigator. I like to go out and see these things. I mean, not to see these things, but to see these areas. I would
Right.
love to see these things. That hasn't happened, but I love to go out and investigate. And if you have something on your property and you want it investigated, I'll come out there. I'll hang out for multiple nights if I need to, and or whatever.
Oh yeah,
But
and one of the other things I bring up, because I'll talk to people and they'll say, well, I only have 10 acres of land, or 4 acres of land, or 5 acres of land, and my very next question is, well, how much land butts up to your 4 or 5 acres?
that's the thing.
They're like,
Yeah.
oh well, I butt up to a preserve. There's thousands of acres. Well, then you have thousands of acres because Bigfoot does not know your border of your property.
Right. Or
You know
is
what I
there
mean?
a creek? Is there a creek or a river or something that some low land that would give them unseen access to that area? Also.
Correct. Water sources are very important. Very important. Water sustains life. Period.
Yes.
So if like we were in a drought, you live here in Florida. We're in a. They said the biggest drought we've had in 24 years.
And I
We're
can't
starting to
believe
get.
that because we
Yeah.
just had two massive hurricanes come through. And there was so much water, it was almost flooding the roads out.
Yeah. And you've been here, and I don't know if you remember, because we would go into town to eat and do stuff like that. And my town is built around a huge lake.
Yes.
A very, very large lake. When I was in high school, we had a drought so bad that you could drive a truck across that massive lake.
That's so
That's how dry it was. You know what I mean? It was that bad. So when they say, I always look back at that when they say, "Oh, we're in a drought, it's the worst drought in 24 years." I'm like, I've seen it a lot worse. I've seen it a lot worse. So
yeah, there was probably about 10 years ago, maybe somewhere around there, we had a drought and the Withlacoochee River actually dried up. I mean, there was a spot underneath the interstate where you could walk across mussel shells and never even get your feet wet and go across the entire river. It's sad.
this this person asked a question: are there any Bigfoot sightings near Dulce Underground Alien Base? Um, I don't even know where that's at. I think it's
So
out in
familiar.
the Midwest somewhere. So I couldn't answer anything. I'm strictly Florida, so I couldn't really tell anybody about that at all.
Yeah, that's definitely out of my realm. I'm
Yep.
not
Blue
sure.
Eyed Northern says they're getting plenty of rain. He says they're flooding in Northwest Louisiana. You
Well,
know, I don't want
maybe
to flood,
maybe it'll
but
drain down here a little bit.
yeah. Well, Florida. I always describe it. People want to understand how Florida works. If you take a peanut, okay, you look at a whole peanut in the shell. That's Florida, and the surface of the top of the peanut is where we live, but it's hollow. It's an
Yeah,
aquifer. It's a deep water basin. So our water has to go through the earth and everything to fill this basin, so we have enough water to drink and do whatever. That's why we end up having water restrictions, because that aquifer gets to a certain point, and that's where we have sinkholes and stuff like that.
right.
Things start collapsing because this aquifer is drying up.
And it
So-
drops the salt water even from the coast if it gets too low.
Yes, yes. I flew over this lake, years ago in a small Cessna, and Lake Jackson is a very large lake, and you can see from the air sinkholes in the lake.
Oh,
You
wow.
know. You can see the sinkholes. So
Wow. But yeah, I guess I can go into a little bit about, I didn't want to copy everybody else in the way I investigate. I try to specialize like into, how can I put this? I like to access areas that are difficult to access, if that makes any sense.
Correct.
There are 3 areas I access that I use a canoe to get into. 2 of them you can only get into by canoe. One of them it's more convenient to use a canoe than it is to walk the long way around, and that's where I have a trail camera. One of them is remote enough that it's what they call unmaintained. If a tree falls across the river, it's going to stay there until it rots.
right.
So you either have to get out of the canoe and haul the canoe over the log, or what I like to do, that's why I don't use a kayak, because canoes are so much more stable. You can stand up in the canoe and sit on the log and pull the canoe over the tree and then bring it back sideways and get back in it and go back in there. If you get lost or get hurt back in there, the only rescue is by being winched up by a helicopter. And because the airboats can't get in, only like a rescue crew in a canoe could get in there, but then look at what they've got to do to get you out, so
That's if they know where you're at.
Right. You've got to be able to show them where you are. So I like that area. It's very remote. I've never seen another person back there at the same time I was back there. I know occasionally there are really motivated canoers that go through there, but I've never seen anybody camp back there. And I don't know that it's illegal, and I haven't felt the need to ask, if you know what I mean.
Well, and that's funny because me and you brought that up last year when we were camping there and stuff, and I told you about this one area where reported sightings. There's nothing recorded, but reported sightings where but it's no trespassing. It's a huge wilderness area, but it says no trespassing. But if you take it by the river by kayak or canoe, there is a law on this river that you are allowed, no matter, even if somebody's got $1 million home with a lawn that goes all the way down to the water, you're allowed to camp anywhere on that river so many feet from the river. So I'm thinking, man, if because I think we discussed it one time where if me and you get the kayaks or whatever and go down this river, we ain't got to go far, and then pull off to the side of the river, pull the kayaks up into the brush and enter it from that way, because there's no trespassing signs on the river. You know what I mean? Right. But on the roadsides going around this property, there is. So I might use that as a catch-22 that I can get in there and look around. See what I'm saying?
It's that old saying, it's easy. Sometimes it's easier to seek forgiveness than permission.
Yeah. I'm too pretty for jail.
And I'm too poor. I'd rather buy equipment than spend it on legal fees. That's for sure.
You gonna eat that cornbread? You can have it, buddy. You can have all the cornbread you want. Just leave me alone.
Oh, that's funny. But no, there's the canoe thing, which I like to do. E-bikes have just been and I hate to use the word, it's so cliche, but they have been a complete game changer for me. I'm disabled from Lyme disease. I can't do as much as I used to do anymore with arthritis and stuff. The e-bikes are almost like my mobility chair to get me out to places. And even if I was completely healthy, it's like we've talked about on the property that you work a lot. It's like it's such a long walk from where you park your car to the area where you even start to investigate. So you've got that long walk. This one area I go to, it's almost like it's like 1.75 miles from the parking lot. Then whatever walking you do during the day to do whatever you're doing out there.
Right.
And
Well-
no matter how hot and tired you get, you still got that huge walk to get back to the car.
And that's what I tell people. As far as you walk in, that's how far you got to walk back. And when you walk back, you're half the energy you were when you went in.
Right.
You know what I mean? And we've done it. And I don't remember. I know you checked it, but it was a very long walk.
But
just to
I
get
can't remember exactly how far, but it was a long walk and it was hot.
And it was hot. And I use it in one of my intro videos, because I use different intro videos, but there's one of them that I use where you're in the background in the intro video, and we're setting up the equipment, and I'm drenched in sweat. You know what I mean? And that was just getting there.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that's what I try to explain to people is when they see my videos and they're 30 minutes, 40 minutes, or whatever. Sometimes I hit an hour, which I don't like to do. At least I like to make it palatable, because all of us, you know, I suffer from it too. Our attention span is just too short. But it's 4 or 5 hours that I'm narrowing down to 30 minutes or 40 minutes.
Right.
Because there's so much just walking and listening and stopping, and just I'll walk so far and stop just to hear and just look around and stuff like that, you know. So, you know, a lot of people don't realize, you know, the time spent. There is a lot of time spent out there, you know, and that's my exercise. That is absolutely my exercise.
Well, what I've been doing with the bikes, and I had even talked about you about bringing my wife's bike next time I come down, and we can try it out, see if you like it.
As long as it doesn't have a basket in the front with flowers.
No. It's actually a guy's bike, but it's the one I used to use, but it couldn't get me out deep enough into the woods. The motor wasn't as powerful enough. And so I got a new bike and gave that one to my wife. So it's a manly bike. So don't worry. It'll be okay. But it allows you to that first part.
We froze up. Hang in there, guys. It's definitely he may not be frozen on y'all's end. He's frozen on my end. So if you hear me, I'm sorry, Brian. But it's definitely not me. I got a great signal.
You're no.
Oh,
I'm back. There we
there
go.
you are. There you are. So you said the bike would get me
to the area and where you want to start your investigation. And one thing I've noticed too is they're quiet enough where they don't disturb the animal life. So being on the bike, you have an opportunity to slip up on something very quickly that, you know, you might come around the curve and something could be standing there and doesn't have enough time to react.
Correct. Because I've experienced that. Me and some other guys were at that one area that me and you've discussed that I won't go by myself.
Right.
We're walking a trail, and as a hunter, I recognize certain things. So we were walking, and this deer was bringing home the mail. He was coming down that trail right at us. And I told everybody, stop, just freeze. You know, let's see what this deer does. Because this deer did not care about us. And it was coming, you know. And then when it got within, let's say, 10 yards of us, it darted off into this field and started going into the woods.
Mm-hmm.
So we sat there. I said, just wait, because it was afraid of something. So we sat there and waited, and sure enough, around the bend came a guy on an e-bike.
Oh, wow.
You see what I'm saying? And it was quiet. We never heard the bike. And it was a hunter. He had a gun on his back, and he was in camos, but he was on this e-bike, you know. I know a lot of researchers have gone to them. You know what I mean? I absolutely see the benefit, and especially the area that I go to that you've been out there.
Right.
You can use it in a lot of areas out there, and then park it, hide it, whatever, and then go into the brush and do what you need to do. but I personally have never tried one, so I don't know.
Right.
You know.
The other advantage, and depending on what type bike you get, it's got a lot of cargo capability. So if you're going out remote and you want to camp, or you want to take a bunch of night observation equipment and batteries, and all the stuff that you would have to just hump out there on your back, you can put that on the racks on the bike and carry it out there. And so it
Right.
gives extra water, whatever else you would need, and you can supply yourself. So it helps a lot that way too, especially in the heat.
Oh yeah, you can imagine when we were out there and we were in that one area, and trust me, it goes even further back. I
Mhm.
have taken it all the way to the very back, all the way,
Wow.
and all that's back there is a barbed wire fence, and then it just keeps going after that. It's
Wow.
just that barbed wire fence is the county line, so we're right
Mhm.
on the edge of the county, and then that goes into the next county, and so if I wanted to, you know, break the law and go over that fence, I can continue on for who knows how many more miles. But you can imagine being even where we were at and finding a print that we want to cast. But that's a long way back to get to the
Yep, it
vehicle to
sure
get the
is.
stuff,
And
you know?
plaster, I don't care what medium you're using, plaster or whatever, it's all heavy. And unless you're by a water source, you got to carry enough water, to mix the plaster. So
Yep. Yep.
it's a huge burden if you've got to carry all that stuff on your back.
Right. Yeah, because the nearest water source out there for that location, there's water sources out there.
Mm-hmm.
But where we were at, it's a big hike to go to this water source to get water and come back. It'd be better to just go to the truck. But if you were an animal and you're going through the woods to get there, you could probably do it in 15 minutes. You know what I
Right.
mean? But a human, bypassing all the obstacles and stuff like that, it would easily take us. It would take a while. It would take some time there and back. Yeah, and you'd be wore out carrying that water back and
Right.
stuff like
Right.
that. So I see the benefit of the e-bike. I just I haven't. I've spent so much money on this,
Oh, I know it.
and I just bought a generator for camping. So the next time, like me and you go out or something like that, I have this very quiet inverter generator that we can charge equipment, charge different things. It would charge a bike with no problem,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, because it's a 4,000 watt generator. You know what I mean? And it's only weighs 48 pounds, so I can take it camping and stuff like that. Um, so I've got that and for research. That's what it's
Mm-hmm.
for. Now, granted, if I have a hurricane and stuff like that, I can use it in
Oh,
the house
yeah.
to run fans in my refrigerator or something. But mostly, I needed something that was dual purpose that I can also use when I go camping, and it's not disturbing anybody or anything like that.
Right. Right.
But all right, man. We over 2 hours, almost 2 hours
My
and 15
gosh,
minutes.
really?
It's been fantastic, and
Yeah,
the
I've
chat
had,
room, I've been keeping an eye on it. And I'm sorry if I didn't get your guys' questions, stuff like that, but I get so enthralled with our guests and listening to what our guests have to say. I tend to get caught up in that, but that's why I'm hosting the show. Me and Johnny is because we're really involved in what they're saying. But go ahead and plug anything that you want to plug. If you want to plug your Gmail again or anything like that, go ahead and let them know. And that way these people hear it, but whoever watches the show later knows how to, see whatever you're presenting or reach out to you if they live near you or whatever.
okay. I actually printed it on a piece of paper because I'm not savvy enough to try and send you something to put up on the screen. But again, my group is the Southeast Wood Ape Monitoring Project, or the Swamp for short. My YouTube and Facebook channels seem to be working now. I made the mistake. I figured it out after working with Facebook's support unit for months on end. A quick tip: don't use the same password for multiple things on the internet, because if somebody figures it out and then they figure out what other things you have, they will try it and they will disable it. My YouTube, my Facebook, I mean, it's just been a mess, but now it's back up. Hopefully, the next few months, I'm going to be able to start regularly putting content out there. The Facebook page had to be wiped, and so it's brand new. So if you want to drop by there and send me a friend request, I'll be glad to add you to there. I printed this on the paper. Hopefully I can get it to show up here. I'm going to have to stand up so I can see what I'm doing. Is this showing up? Maybe.
Well, we can see the Southeast Wood Ape Monitoring Project, the swamp. Observations from the swamp.
The swamp and the Gmail, the swamp investigator at gmail.com.
The swamp investigator at gmail.com. Okay.
So you can just pause that if you're watching this at a later date and get that off there if you need to. But yes, I would appreciate trying to rebuild the Facebook page and stuff if you guys would help me out on that.
No, absolutely. We have a great crowd. We have a great people, great support, and don't be surprised if you see people jumping on it and supporting you and what you're doing and stuff like that. I have to admit, we have great people, just all around, just some wonderful people that watch the show and stuff like that. So.
Hey, well, if anybody is in the Florida area and you need help with anything, checking anything out, investigating, we'll be glad to put something together for you.
Yeah. Well, good deal. And, me and you will be seeing each other in the future. There's no doubt about that.
Yes.
I'm just an independent guy doing my thing. You know what I mean? But me, I'm always looking forward to somebody going out with me because, it helps me go into areas or do things that I wouldn't normally do by myself, because I am by myself, and if something happens to me, I'm screwed. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I take advantage when I have somebody to go into certain areas that I did not feel comfortable with by myself, because of certain things I found, or animals like hogs and stuff like that. So.
And even, I mean, I hate to admit it, but we're not spring chickens anymore, So even health wise, it's nice to have somebody there with you that can watch out for, if you're starting to succumb to the heat or whatever, to catch it before it gets out of control. So
absolutely. Because it will creep up on you really quick.
Yes.
So good, Brian. Outstanding, buddy. Great show. Love having you. I was looking forward to it. I'm sorry that Johnny couldn't be here for the whole thing, but he's a family guy.
Family comes first, man. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And he's got a baby on the way. So it's not going to end for him for another 18 years. So, but I always tell him, hey, that's why we're a team, man. I got this. Don't worry about it.
We'll guys work together really well. So,
all right, man. Also want to let everybody know, if you're new to the podcast or anything like that, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, get the word out. We're having a lot of fun, and we enjoy you guys being a part of this journey. Also check out Johnny's research channel, which is the Sasquatch Encounter Brigade. Also, he has a Facebook page, Sasquatch Encounter Brigade. Check out my research channel, which is BFFG, Bigfoot Florida Guy. And I also have a Facebook page now. I just started this year. I never did the Facebook thing for that. So now I'm doing that. And that's the same thing, BFFG, or, Bigfoot Florida Guy. You can also reach out to me at BFFG Bigfoot Research at gmail.com or Bigfoot Florida Guy at gmail.com. So, again, thank you, Brian. Awesome. I look forward to hanging out with you again in the future, dude.
Yes. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to our next field excursion.
Yeah, right on. I'm gonna drop you backstage, and I'll be with you in just a moment.
Okay.
All
Good
right,
night,
buddy.
everybody.
All right, guys. Thank you. You guys are wonderful. I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. God bless each and every one of you guys, and look forward to seeing you guys again soon. We have a lot of great guests coming up in the next month or two. They're already, scheduled or pinned in, so we got some great things coming up in the future. So look forward to seeing you guys, and take care. God bless. Have a fantastic weekend.